Tonight we step softly onto polished wooden floors. Outside, a garden rests in pale morning light. Gravel has been raked into careful patterns. A single pine leans slightly toward a quiet pond. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell resonates low and steady, dissolving gently into air. We are in Japan during the Edo period, an era stretching from 1603 to 1868. It is a time not of constant war, but of controlled peace. Swords are worn, yet rarely drawn. Armor is preserved, yet seldom tested in battle. Authority flows downward through careful layers of rank and obligation. In this episode, we will move slowly through that layered world. We will begin with the daily life of a samurai in Edo, rising before dawn to practice discipline in a city that hums with quiet order. We will examine the rule of Tokugawa Ieyasu, whose consolidation of power shaped centuries of stability. We will consider the Sakoku policy of national seclusion and its subtle consequences. We will encounter hidden Christian communities whose faith endured in silence. We will sit in meditation halls shaped by Zen philosophy and the moral framework later called Bushido. We will follow the movement of rice taxes and the long processions of regional lords bound to the capital. And at the end, we will stand beneath drifting cherry blossoms, where stillness feels almost tangible. This is not a story of battlefield clamor. It is a story of restraint. Of ritual, of hierarchy, maintained through repetition. So, let your breathing slow. Imagine sliding open a paper screen. The air is cool. Tatami mats cushion your step. Dawn is arriving in Edo. And you are a samurai. The city of Edo, known today as Tokyo, wakes before sunrise. In the early 17th century, it is already vast, one of the largest cities in the world. Wooden houses cluster along canals and roads. Castle towers rise above the center like a quiet promise of authority. Smoke threads upward from thousands of cooking fires. You rise in near darkness. Your home is orderly but not extravagant. The floors are covered in tatami mats woven from rice straw. Sliding paper doors soften the light that will soon filter in. Your bedding has been folded and stored neatly. Space is preserved through discipline. You dress carefully. A kimono of subdued color, appropriate to your rank. Over it, perhaps a Haori jacket bearing a modest family crest. At your side, the paired swords known as Daisho rest within reach. They are symbols of status more than tools of daily use. Yet their presence shapes how others see you. You are a samurai. In earlier centuries, that title meant mounted warrior, sworn to a lord in constant conflict. But during the Edo period, under the authority of the Tokugawa shogunate, peace prevails. Large-scale warfare has subsided. The realm is unified. Your life is structured less by combat than by routine. Before breakfast, you practice. In a courtyard or training hall. Wooden practice swords strike in measured rhythm. Step, turn, cut, again and again. The air is cool against your skin. Breath forms briefly in the morning chill. There is no enemy before you, only repetition. Discipline is internal now. Precision matters not because battle is imminent, but because identity depends upon it. A samurai must embody readiness, even when readiness is rarely tested. After drills, you attend to official duties. Many samurai in Edo serve as administrators, clerks, inspectors, record keepers. The bureaucracy of peace requires literate men trained in both martial and scholarly arts. You sit at a low desk, brush in hand, copying documents in careful calligraphy. Rice stipends are recorded. Reports from distant domains are summarized. Orders are transmitted through layers of authority. Your income does not come from trade. Samurai are forbidden from engaging in commerce directly. Instead, you receive a stipend measured in koku of rice, theoretically enough to feed a household for a year. Yet this stipend is often fixed. Prices fluctuate. Urban life is costly. Some samurai quietly struggle to maintain appearances. The sword at your side signals status, but your purse may feel lighter than that of a prosperous merchant. Still, outward composure must remain intact. Throughout the city, hierarchy is visible, but calm. Samurai occupy distinct districts. Their gait is measured, their speech restrained. Commoners bow slightly as you pass, acknowledging the social order embedded in daily life. The code guiding your conduct is complex. Later generations will call it Bushido, the way of the warrior. In your time, it is less a single written code than a collection of expectations drawn from Confucian loyalty, Zen discipline, and inherited martial values. You are expected to be loyal to your daimyo, your regional lord, to serve faithfully, to maintain honor, to avoid unnecessary conflict. Duels occur but rarely. Punishments for drawing a blade unjustly are severe. Peace is precious. Disorder is unwelcome. At midday, you return home for a simple meal. Rice, pickled vegetables, perhaps fish. The flavors are clean, restrained. Conversation is quiet. Children learn to kneel properly, to bow at correct angles. In the afternoon, you may study texts on strategy, poetry, Confucian classics imported from China. Literacy is common among samurai, and scholarship becomes a marker of refinement. You copy passages carefully, the brush gliding across paper in controlled arcs. The rhythm of your day is steady. Morning drill, administrative duty, measured meals, study, evening reflection. There is dignity in this repetition, but also constraint. You are bound to Edo through a system that will become clearer in later segments. Travel requires permission. Allegiance is formalized through ritual attendance at court. Even your residence may be dictated by policy. Yet, within these boundaries, there is space for contemplation. As evening falls, lantern light flickers against wooden beams. You remove your swords and place them carefully on a stand. Their lacquered scabbards gleam faintly. You kneel before a small household shrine. Incense rises in thin, fragrant threads. You bow your head. Peace has endured for decades. For a warrior class, peace is both blessing and quiet challenge. Identity must be preserved without the proving ground of war. Honor must be cultivated inwardly. Outside, Edo continues its subdued hum. Merchants close shop shutters. Boats drift along canals. The castle of the shogun stands steady at the center, its white walls reflecting moonlight. You lie down once more on folded bedding spread across tatami. Tomorrow will unfold much the same as today. Drill, record, bow, study. In the stillness of this controlled peace, the life of a samurai is less dramatic than legend suggests. It is structured, bureaucratic, restrained. And at the center of that restraint stands the man who made such stability possible. In our next segment, we will turn to the rule of Tokugawa Ieyasu and explore how centralization created the calm discipline that shapes your days. Before the quiet routines of Edo could settle into place, there was uncertainty. In the late 16th century, Japan was fractured by generations of conflict. Regional warlords contested territory. Alliances formed and dissolved like mist over rice fields. Castles rose quickly and sometimes fell just as quickly. Out of this shifting landscape emerged a patient and calculating figure. Tokugawa Ieyasu did not rush toward dominance. He waited, he observed. He aligned himself carefully with stronger forces when necessary, then stepped forward when the moment was precise. In 1600, at the Battle of Sekigahara, his coalition prevailed over rival factions. The clash was decisive but not chaotic in our telling. It marked the settling of long instability into something firmer. 3 years later, in 1603, the emperor granted him the title of shogun, formalizing his authority as military ruler of Japan. The emperor remained in Kyoto, dignified and symbolically central. But real political power flowed through Ieyasu and eventually his descendants. He established his government in Edo. At that time, Edo was still developing. Its wetlands gradually transformed into structured neighborhoods. Under Ieyasu's direction, canals were expanded, roads constructed, and a grand castle complex built at the city's heart. The castle became both administrative center and quiet, symbol of centralized power. Centralization was not achieved through spectacle alone. Ieyasu reorganized the daimyo, the regional lords who governed domains across the country. Some were trusted allies known as Fudai daimyo, granted strategic territories near Edo. Others, former rivals known as Tozama daimyo, were assigned lands farther away. Their movements monitored with calm attentiveness. Land assessments were conducted carefully. Agricultural output was measured in koku of rice, providing a standardized metric for taxation and obligation. Revenue could now be predicted with greater stability. Order replaced improvisation. Legal codes were compiled. One of the foundational frameworks, later formalized as the Book Shahato, set clear expectations for daimyo conduct. Castles were regulated. Marriages required approval. Private alliances were discouraged. It was governance through quiet limitation, not oppression in every moment, but steady containment. Ieyasu also understood symbolism. Ceremonies were conducted with precision. Court etiquette reinforced hierarchy. Even architecture conveyed layered authority, with gates and corridors arranged to remind visitors of their place. For the samurai of Segment 1, this system created the structure within which daily life unfolded. Stipends were allocated according to rank. Domains were clearly defined. Loyalty was channeled upward in predictable lines. Peace, however, was not merely the absence of war. It required vigilance. Ieyasu and his successors implemented surveillance through obligation. Daimyo were required to maintain residences in Edo. Their families often remained there, ensuring continued allegiance. Travel was documented. Reports flowed steadily toward the shogunate. The result was a network of accountability that reduced the likelihood of rebellion. At the same time, commerce flourished within these boundaries. Roads such as the Tokaido connected Edo to Kyoto and other major centers. Post stations offered rest for travelers. Merchants carried goods between regions with growing efficiency. Urban culture began to bloom quietly. Theater, literature, and craft traditions developed under the umbrella of stability. Peace allowed attention to turn inward, toward refinement rather than expansion. Aizu himself eventually retired formally, passing the title of shogun to his son, while retaining influence behind the scenes. This act reinforced continuity. Succession was structured, not left to uncertainty. When Ieyasu died in 1616, he was later enshrined at Nikko, elevated almost to sacred status. His legacy was not merely victory in battle, but the construction of a system that endured for over 2.5 centuries. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan entered a period of relative internal calm. Conflict did not vanish entirely, but it became contained, localized, managed. For the samurai in Edo, this meant years, even generations, without major warfare. Swords remained polished. Drills continued at dawn. But the true battlefield had shifted from open plains to administrative offices and ceremonial halls. The peace created by Ieyasu came with trade-offs. Stability required boundaries. Boundaries extended not only to daimyo and samurai, but eventually to the nation itself. In the next segment, we will explore the Sakoku policy, often described as national isolation, and consider how controlled separation from the wider world shaped daily life within Tokugawa Japan. For now, imagine Edo Castle at dusk. White walls glowing softly, moats reflecting fading light, paper screens sliding closed with quiet finality. Centralization has settled, like still water. And the realm rests within carefully drawn lines. As the decades of Tokugawa rule settled into predictable rhythm, another layer of control emerged. It was not loud. It did not announce itself with fanfare. It took the form of edicts, port regulations, and careful watchfulness at the edges of the sea. This approach would later be called Sakoku, often translated as closed country. The term suggests sealed borders and absolute isolation, yet the reality was more measured. Japan was not entirely closed, but it was carefully filtered. In the early 17th century, foreign ships had appeared regularly along Japanese coasts. Portuguese traders brought firearms and silk. Spanish missionaries carried Christian teachings. Dutch merchants arrived seeking trade opportunities. At first, these encounters were tolerated, even welcomed in certain domains. Firearms had proven useful in earlier conflicts. Trade goods were desirable. New ideas held intrigue. Yet, from the perspective of the Tokugawa shogunate, foreign influence carried risks. Christianity, in particular, unsettled the carefully ordered hierarchy. It encouraged allegiance to a faith that transcended local loyalty. It connected believers to distant authorities beyond the control of Edo. Gradually, restrictions increased. In the 1630s, a series of edicts limited foreign contact. Japanese subjects were forbidden from traveling abroad. Those who had already left were barred from returning. Large seagoing vessels capable of long ocean voyages were restricted in construction. Foreign traders were confined to designated ports. Most famously, Dutch merchants were allowed to operate from the small artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki Harbor. They conducted trade under supervision, separated physically from the broader population. Chinese traders also maintained limited commercial relationships. The exchange of goods did not cease. It narrowed from within Edo. This policy felt less like sudden closure and more like a steady tightening of threads. Travel documents became essential. Coastal domains monitored ships carefully. News from abroad arrived indirectly, filtered through official channels. For the samurai administrators, sakoku meant additional paperwork, records of incoming goods, reports of coastal inspections, observations of foreign traders' movements. Bureaucracy expanded quietly. For merchants, it meant recalibration. Overseas opportunities diminished, but internal trade networks strengthened. Roads and post stations grew busier. Cultural exchange turned inward, refining distinctly Japanese forms of art, theater, and literature. For ordinary townspeople, the wider world became distant. Almost mythical. Rumors circulated of lands beyond the horizon, of unfamiliar religions, of foreign fabrics and strange languages. Yet these remained abstract, glimpsed only through carefully controlled contact. Isolation also brought a kind of stability, without constant foreign competition or colonial entanglement. Domestic industries developed steadily. Agricultural techniques improved. Urban populations expanded. Education spread among the samurai and merchant classes alike. Stillness can foster creativity. Woodblock prints flourished. Kabuki theater gained popularity. Poetry circles formed in tea houses. The floating world of urban entertainment emerged beneath the overarching calm of political order, yet beneath this cultivated interiority lay tension. Hidden Christian communities persisted, especially in regions like Kyushu. Some believers practiced their faith quietly, blending rituals with local customs to avoid detection. Official persecution of Christianity had occurred earlier in the century, and while active suppression lessened over time, suspicion remained. The memory of the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637 to 1638 lingered. That uprising, involving many Christian peasants, had reinforced the shogunate's resolve to prevent religious dissent from destabilizing authority. Thus, sakoku was not merely about trade, it was about control of belief, control of allegiance, control of influence. From the perspective of Edo's samurai, it meant fewer unpredictable currents, fewer foreign envoys arriving unexpectedly, a clearer sense of boundaries. The sea still surrounded Japan. Waves still broke against rocky shores. Fishermen still cast nets at dawn. But beyond the horizon lay a world deliberately kept at arm's length. Within these boundaries, society deepened inwardly. Zen temples refined meditative practice. Scholars studied Confucian texts with renewed focus. Craft traditions evolved without rapid external disruption. The nation became, in a sense, a carefully tended garden, pruned, protected, contained, yet no containment is absolute. Ideas have a way of seeping through cracks. Objects travel. Stories circulate quietly. Even in isolation, curiosity remains alive. In the next segment, we will step into one of the most delicate corners of this contained world, the hidden Christian communities whose faith endured in silence, leaving subtle traces that archaeologists and historians would uncover centuries later. For now, Imagine standing on a quiet shoreline at dusk. The horizon wide and empty, the tide steady, the gates of the realm closed, but not entirely silent. In a nation carefully ordered by the Tokugawa shogunate, belief was expected to follow clear lines. Temples registered households. Shrines marked seasonal rituals. Village records documented affiliation. Faith, like land and class, was categorized, and yet, in certain coastal villages and remote valleys, something quieter endured. Christianity had first arrived in Japan in the 16th century, carried by missionaries such as Francis Xavier. For a time, it spread with surprising speed. Some daimyo converted, churches were built, trade and faith intertwined. But as we have seen, suspicion grew. By the early 17th century, Christianity was formally banned. Converts were required to renounce their faith. Public expressions ceased. Churches were dismantled. Missionaries departed or faced severe consequences. Officially, the religion vanished. Unofficially, it adapted. In regions such as Nagasaki and the Goto Islands, small communities continued to practice their beliefs in secrecy. They became known later as Kakure Kirishitan, hidden Christians. They did not build steeples. They did not ring bells. Instead, they folded their prayers into ordinary life. A household shrine might appear, at first glance, like a Buddhist altar, but within it subtle symbols could be found. A statue resembling Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, might conceal associations with the Virgin Mary. Prayers were memorized and whispered, passed down through generations in altered form. Without clergy, doctrine shifted gently. Latin phrases transformed into phonetic echoes. Biblical stories mingled with local folklore. The faith became layered, shaped by memory rather than formal instruction. From the outside, these communities blended into the broader fabric of Tokugawa society. They paid taxes. They attended required temple registrations. They fulfilled village duties. But within their homes at night, beneath low wooden ceilings, they recited inherited words whose meanings were sometimes partially remembered, partially imagined. The shogunate enforced periodic examinations to identify Christians. One method involved the fumi, small plaques bearing images of Christ or the Virgin. Suspected individuals were asked to step upon them, symbolically rejecting the faith. Many complied outwardly to avoid punishment. Some resisted and faced severe consequences. Over time, survival often meant concealment rather than confrontation. For the samurai administrators tasked with overseeing villages, this dynamic created an atmosphere of quiet vigilance. Reports were filed, inspections conducted, but widespread rebellion did not erupt. Instead, faith receded into private spaces. Centuries later, archaeologists and historians began uncovering traces of these hidden communities. Burial sites revealed objects placed with careful intention, fragments of rosaries, medallions altered to resemble common ornaments, written prayers preserved in unexpected corners of family archives. The evidence was not dramatic. It was delicate. A cross etched faintly into wood, a ceramic figurine with features slightly out of alignment, an oral tradition preserved through rhythm and repetition. These remnants suggest endurance not through power, but through memory. In a society structured by hierarchy and surveillance, hidden Christians navigated the boundaries of conformity and devotion. They adjusted rituals to resemble sanctioned practices. They synchronized festivals with broader community calendars. They survived by blending in. This blending was not without cost. Over generations, theological details faded. Concepts blurred. What remained was less formal religion and more inherited identity, shaped by both fear and persistence. For many hidden Christian communities, official recognition did not come until the 19th century, when Japan reopened to the wider world. Missionaries returning to Nagasaki encountered villagers who had preserved fragments of prayers for more than 2 centuries. Imagine the quiet astonishment of recognition, words remembered across generations, symbols kept beneath floorboards, belief folded into silence. Within the larger stillness of Tokugawa peace, these communities existed as small currents beneath the surface. The Sokoku policy had narrowed external contact. Religious restrictions had enforced conformity, yet human conviction found subtle paths in the dim interiors of wooden houses, lit by oil lamps. Whispered prayers mingled with the ordinary sounds of domestic life. The creak of floorboards, the rustle of silk sleeves, the distant call of night watchmen. Nothing outwardly remarkable, and yet, beneath the calm order of Edo society, layers of quiet complexity persisted. In the next segment, we will turn from hidden faith to a more openly embraced spiritual framework, the intertwined philosophies of Zen and the moral code later described as Bushido, which shaped the inner lives of many samurai during this era of prolonged peace. For now, let the image settle. A small wooden room, a hidden symbol, a faith carried not in stone cathedrals but in memory. While some beliefs survived in secrecy, others stood openly at the center of samurai identity. In the calm architecture of Tokugawa society, spiritual life was neither chaotic nor flamboyant. It was disciplined, measured, integrated into routine. For many samurai, Zen Buddhism offered a framework for inward stillness. Zen did not require elaborate ceremony. Its power lay in simplicity. A tatami mat, a small meditation hall, the steady rhythm of breath drawn in and released slowly into cool morning air. At dawn, before administrative duties began, a samurai might sit in seize posture, spine straight, hands resting lightly. Outside, Edo stirred gradually. Vendors prepared stalls. The faint rumble of carts echoed on wooden bridges. Inside, there was quiet. Zen practice emphasized direct experience, awareness without attachment, acceptance of impermanence. In a society that had transitioned from constant warfare to sustained peace, this emphasis on internal discipline provided continuity. The sword was still worn, but its purpose shifted. Training continued in dojo halls. Wooden floors polished smooth by decades of footwork. The swish of bamboo practice swords cutting air replaced the clash of battlefield steel. Movements were refined to their essence, efficient, economical. Bushao, often translated as the way of the warrior, became an articulated moral code during this period. Though its ideals drew from earlier traditions, the relative peace of the Edo era allowed them to be formalized in writing and teaching. Loyalty to one's lord, integrity in conduct, courage tempered by restraint, honor preserved through self-control. These principles were not always perfectly observed. Human nature is complex, yet they provided a script for behavior, especially in a world where martial valor could no longer be proven in frequent combat. The samurai's identity required redefinition. He was expected to be both warrior and scholar, proficient with the blade and with the brush. Literacy expanded among the samurai class. Confucian texts were studied, poetry composed, calligraphy practiced with deliberate strokes, ink pooled slightly at the start of each character, then thinned as the brush lifted. Each line reflected intention. Each pause between strokes held meaning. Zen monasteries sometimes served as centers of learning. Meditation halls stood within temple complexes shaded by pine and maple. In autumn, fallen leaves gathered quietly along stone paths. Impermanence was not an abstract concept. It was visible in each seasonal shift. For a samurai navigating bureaucratic life, Zen offered a method of internal alignment. Paperwork could be tedious, hierarchies constraining, yet discipline and thought allowed steadiness amid repetition. Bushido reinforced this steadiness externally. Prescribed appropriate responses to insult, obligation, and duty. It emphasized self-sacrifice, though actual instances of ritual self-harm were far rarer than popular imagination suggests. The ideal was composure rather than drama. In this structured world, emotion was not denied, but regulated. A raised voice would seem out of place in a formal audience chamber. The rustle of silk garments, the soft slide of paper screens, the measured cadence of speech defined interaction. Even leisure reflected. Controlled elegance. Tea ceremonies distilled hospitality into ritual, each movement precise, each utensil chosen with care. Silence was not emptiness, but shared awareness. Poetry gatherings invited reflection on nature. A single plum blossom could inspire lines contemplating transience and resilience. For many samurai, this blending of martial heritage and spiritual practice created a layered identity. They were guardians of order in a peaceful age, administrators with swords at their sides, students of stillness in a bustling city. The outward calm of Edo society found resonance in the inward calm cultivated through Zen. And yet, ideals do not eliminate practical concerns. Rice stipends needed management. Households required maintenance. Travel obligations imposed strain. In the next segment, we will examine the economic foundations that supported this delicate hierarchy, focusing on rice taxation and the demanding system known as Sankin kōtai, which required daimyo to maintain dual residences and undertake regular processions to Edo. For now, imagine a small meditation hall at dawn, tatami mats cool beneath folded legs, a single beam of light entering through wooden shutters, breath rising and falling in steady rhythm, stillness within structure. Beneath the composed posture of the meditating samurai, beneath the polished etiquette of castle corridors, lay something very practical. Rice. In Tokugawa, Japan, rice was more than food. It was currency, measurement, obligation, stability. Domains were assessed according to their kokudaka, an estimate of annual rice yield measured in koku, a unit roughly sufficient to feed one person for a year. A daimyo's status depended not simply on land size, but on productive capacity. Fields stretched in careful grids beyond castle towns. In spring, paddies filled with shallow water that reflected pale skies. Farmers bent slowly at the waist, pressing seedlings into soft mud. The motion was repetitive, patient, unhurried. Their labor sustained the entire hierarchy. Peasants paid taxes primarily in rice, surrendering a significant portion of their harvest to domain storehouses. From there, rice was redistributed, sold, or converted into stipends for samurai retainers. The samurai in Edo, dressed in layered silk, depended upon the steady rhythm of planting and harvest hundreds of miles away. This dependence created both security and tension. A good harvest meant stability. A poor harvest rippled upward through the ranks. Prices fluctuated in urban markets. Merchants who specialized in rice brokerage grew increasingly influential, even as their official status remained lower than that of warriors. Thus, the economy balanced delicately on agricultural cycles. Layered atop this system was Sankin kōtai, the policy requiring daimyo to alternate their residence between their home domain and Edo. 1 year in their provincial castle, 1 year in the shogun's capital. Their families were required to remain in Edo permanently, serving as both honored guests and subtle guarantees of loyalty. The processions themselves became spectacles of measured grandeur. When a daimyo prepared to travel, the roads filled gradually with retainers, attendants, banners, and lacquered palanquins. Silk standards fluttered gently. Armor gleamed, though it was rarely needed for battle. Villagers along the route paused to watch. The procession passed not in haste, but with controlled dignity. Roads such as the Tokugawa connected Edo to Kyoto and beyond, lined with post stations offering lodging and provisions. Inns filled with traveling samurai and officials, their conversations subdued, their schedules carefully planned. Sankin kōtai imposed financial strain on daimyo. Maintaining 2 residences required significant resources. Travel expenses accumulated steadily. Retainers had to be fed, housed, and clothed in both locations. This strain was intentional. By channeling domain wealth into obligatory display and infrastructure, the shogunate limited the capacity for rebellion. Resources that might have funded private armies were instead spent on travel and urban maintenance. For Edo, the effect was transformative. The city swelled with alternating waves of provincial households. Craftsmen found steady demand for textiles, armor maintenance, carpentry, and ceremonial goods. Markets thrived. Urban neighborhoods expanded outward. The rhythm of departure and arrival became part of the city's pulse. For a samurai attached to a daimyo household, Sankin kōtai meant frequent relocation, packing and unpacking, adjusting to different climates, maintaining dual loyalties to domain and capital. Children grew up between 2 worlds. Wives managed households in Edo while husbands traveled. Letters carried news slowly across distances. The movement was orderly, scheduled, predictable. And yet, it was movement nonetheless. In a society otherwise defined by fixed class boundaries. Sankin kōtai introduced a structured circulation of elites through the country's arteries. Roads were maintained, bridges repaired, way stations regulated. Even isolation under sekkoku did not mean stagnation within. Rice flowed from fields to storehouses. Gold and silver coins circulated in markets. Daimyo processions moved like tides along prescribed routes. For peasants, however, mobility remained limited. Their lives centered on village fields. Taxes were due regardless of weather's mercy. Famine years, when they came, tested endurance quietly. The samurai who relied on rice stipends might feel economic pressure through delayed payments or devalued currency. But it was the farmers who first sensed the shift in soil and sky. Thus, the Tokugawa system rested on layered interdependence. Farmers sustained samurai. Samurai upheld daimyo. Daimyo pledged loyalty to the shogun. The shogun maintained overarching order, each tier bound to the next by obligation, ritual, and rice dot in the next segment. We will widen our focus beyond the samurai to consider the broader class structure of Tokugawa society. Peasants, artisans, merchants, and the rigid hierarchy that shaped daily interaction and limited social mobility. For now, imagine a long road at early morning, mist hovering low over fields, a procession approaching in the distance, rice seedlings shimmering in shallow water dot movement within stillness. The Tokugawa world was orderly, not merely in its architecture or its ceremonies, but in its human arrangement. Society was structured according to a formal hierarchy often described as shi no keio, samurai, peasants, artisans, merchants. Each class carried expectations as fixed, as the stone foundations of Edo Castle dot at the top stood the samurai. Though many no longer fought wars, they retained social prestige and the exclusive right to bear swords. Their hairstyles, clothing, and posture signaled status immediately. Even the way they entered a room conveyed rank. Below them were the peasants. This placement might seem counterintuitive to modern eyes. Farmers were valued precisely because they produced rice, the basis of the economy. Their labor sustained all others. Official ideology praised their productivity and moral simplicity, yet praise did not mean comfort. Life followed agricultural cycles with little variation. Planting in spring, weeding in summer, harvest in autumn, repairs in winter. Taxes were assessed rigorously. Movement between villages required permission. Clothing was practical, usually of rough hemp or cotton, dyed in muted shades. Village life was communal and regulated. Headmen recorded births and deaths. Collective responsibility ensured that if one family failed to meet obligations, others might share the burden. Artisans occupied the next tier: carpenters, potters, swordsmiths, textile weavers. Their workshops lined urban streets, especially in growing cities like Edo and Osaka. They transformed raw materials into objects of daily necessity and refined beauty. A swordsmith's forge glowed in controlled heat, hammers striking steel in steady rhythm. A potter's wheel spun smoothly, clay rising beneath patient hands. Craft required skill and repetition and skill, and at the base of the official hierarchy stood merchants. Though often economically powerful, merchants were theoretically considered the least honorable class, as they profited from the labor of others rather than producing essential goods themselves in practice. However, wealth complicates hierarchy as cities expanded. Merchant houses accumulated significant resources. They financed daimyo debts. They operated rice exchanges. They sponsored theaters, and printmaking enterprises. Their homes, while outwardly modest to comply with sumptuary laws, sometimes concealed refined interiors, painted screens, carefully arranged gardens. Subtle luxury rather than overt display dot this tension between official status and economic reality shaped much of Edo society. A samurai might outrank a merchant socially, yet depend upon merchant credit to maintain his household. Politeness masked this interdependence. Class boundaries were reinforced through law. Clothing regulations restricted fabric types and ornamentation. Marriage across classes was limited and often discouraged. Occupations were typically inherited. A farmer's son became a farmer. A merchant's daughter married within merchant circles. Upward mobility existed, but it was rare and gradual. Punishments also reflected hierarchy. Minor infractions might result in public reprimand or confinement. More serious crimes brought harsher consequences, though even then, procedures emphasized order rather than spectacle. Public spaces mirrored this structure. Markets buzzed with layered interaction. Samurai passed through with measured composure. Peasants arrived with produce. Merchants tallied accounts behind wooden counters. Artisans displayed wares under fabric awnings. Yet even in busy marketplaces, etiquette prevailed. Bows were exchanged. Voices kept controlled. Conflict rarely erupted openly. Social harmony, or at least its appearance, was valued deeply. Outside the formal four classes existed marginalized groups, such as Ada and Hinin, who performed tasks considered impure or undesirable. Their presence reminds us that even orderly systems contain exclusions. They lived at society's edges, essential yet stigmatized. Still, for most inhabitants, daily life was defined less by abstract hierarchy and more by routine. Waking at dawn, preparing meals of rice and vegetables, tending fields or opening shop shutters, closing doors at dusk. The structure of society provided predictability. Predictability offered stability. Stability fostered peace. Yet within this peace, subtle ambitions persisted. Merchants sought quiet influence. Samurai sought purpose beyond battle. Peasants hoped for favorable weather and lighter taxes. Human desires rarely vanish simply because systems are rigid. As we move into our final segment, we will step inside the world of the daimyo themselves, observing the carefully orchestrated processions and the textures of noble households. There, hierarchy manifested not only in law but in silk, ceremony, and slow grandeur. For now, imagine a city street in Edo at midday. Wooden storefronts aligned neatly. Sandals brushing packed earth. A samurai passing a merchant with a brief, precise bow. Order layered upon order. If the hierarchy of Tokugawa society could be seen in motion, it revealed itself most clearly in the procession of a daimyo. The day begins early. Mist lingers low over the road, leading out of Edo. Pine trees stand in quiet rows, their needles stirring gently in the faintest breeze. Villagers and townspeople gather at a respectful distance. They do not crowd. They do not call out. They wait. First come the foot retainers. Their garments are coordinated in color and emblem, each bearing the crest of their lord. Sandals press softly against the road in synchronized rhythm. Spears are held upright, banners lifted high but not dramatically. Everything is controlled. Then the mounted samurai follow. Armor is polished, though rarely scarred. Helmets curve elegantly. The horses move at an even pace, neither hurried nor languid. Their hooves create a steady percussion against wooden bridges and packed earth dot at the center. Shielded by layers of attendants, travels the daimyo himself. He may ride within a lacquered palanquin, curtains drawn just enough to preserve privacy without complete concealment. Gold fittings catch brief flashes of sunlight. Silk tassels sway gently with each step of the bearers. The procession is not meant to intimidate through violence. It is meant to display order. Each retainer knows his place. Each pause is coordinated. Even rest stops at post stations are choreographed with quiet efficiency. Tea is prepared. Horses watered. Accounts checked. This is Sankin kōtai, made visible. The road becomes a moving corridor of hierarchy. Commoners kneel or bow as the procession passes. They return to their tasks once it disappears into the distance. For them, it is spectacle layered atop routine. For the daimyo, the procession is obligation. It requires expense. It demands organization. It reinforces allegiance to the shogunate in Edo. It consumes resources that might otherwise consolidate regional autonomy. And yet, within the structure there is a certain aesthetic refinement. Textiles are selected with care. Armor lacing contrasts subtly with undergarments. The rhythm of movement has almost musical quality. Even the spacing between attendants reflects intention. In the provincial domain, a similar sense of order defines the daimyo's castle town. Stone walls rise in sloped tiers. Wooden gates open inward to reveal layered courtyards. Gardens are arranged with deliberate asymmetry. A single pine tree might be positioned to frame distant hills. Inside the main hall, tatami mats are aligned precisely. Sliding screens painted with seasonal motifs divide rooms. In winter, braziers glow softly. Warming air scented faintly with charcoal. Meals in such households differ markedly from those of peasants or lower-ranking samurai. Rice remains central, but it is polished more finely. Fish may be served fresh from coastal waters, arranged with aesthetic care. Pickled vegetables add color and contrast. Presentation matters as much as flavor. Silk garments are layered according to season. In spring, lighter fabrics with subtle floral patterns. In autumn, deeper tones reflecting falling leaves. Comfort exists here. Heated chambers. Attentive servants. Curated surroundings. Yet even this comfort is circumscribed by duty. The daimyo cannot abandon Sankin kōtai. He cannot disregard the shogun's authority. His wealth is visible, but so are his constraints. His household lives partly in Edo, partly in his home domain. Children grow accustomed to formality. Education emphasizes calligraphy, history, proper posture. In this environment, ceremony shapes daily existence. Audiences are conducted with measured speech. Gifts exchanged with careful etiquette. Alliances maintained through marriage and correspondence. Outside castle walls, artisans and merchants support the noble household's needs. Armor must be maintained. Silk woven. Lacquer repaired. The grandeur of the daimyo rests upon layers of invisible labor. Thus, even at the summit of hierarchy, interdependence remains. The procession that began at dawn continues steadily toward its destination. No battle awaits. No dramatic confrontation interrupts the journey, only miles of road. The soft sound of sandals, the gentle sway of silk dot as the sun lowers in the sky. The procession approaches a post station. Lanterns are lit one by one. The air cools. Voices soften further. Order has been displayed. Obligation fulfilled for another cycle dot, and within that display, we see the culmination of Tokugawa structure. Ritualized movement, constrained luxury, peace sustained through discipline. Stillness beneath cherry blossoms. Across these segments, we have walked slowly through the Edo period, from dawn drills of samurai in Edo to the patient governance of Tokugawa Ieyasu, from the quiet boundaries of Shikoku to hidden prayers whispered in wooden homes, from Zen meditation halls to rice paddies shimmering in early light, from rigid class hierarchies to silk-lined processions moving along misty roads. What emerges is not a story of constant conflict, but of controlled peace. The sword remained at the waist, yet it rested. The roads were busy, yet regulated. The classes were rigid, yet interdependent. Isolation narrowed horizons, yet culture deepened inwardly. Under cherry blossoms in spring, petals drifted softly onto castle moats and village paths alike. For a brief moment, samurai and merchant, peasant and daimyo stood beneath the same falling bloom. Impermanence was visible everywhere. Zen taught acceptance of this transience. Bushido prescribed dignity within it. Rice cycles embodied it. Processions enacted it. The Edo period endured for over 2 centuries, a long stretch of relative internal calm in a world often defined by upheaval. Its stillness was not accidental. It was constructed carefully, maintained deliberately, and experienced differently at every level of society. For the samurai, it meant transformation from warrior to bureaucrat. For the peasant, it meant steady labor tied to soil. For the merchant, it meant quiet accumulation beneath official modesty. For the daimyo, it meant grandeur bound by obligation. And for all, it meant living within boundaries drawn firmly yet gracefully. Imagine now a final scene, a garden in early evening, cherry blossoms drifting onto a still pond, a distant temple bell sounding once, then fading. The world is orderly. The air is cool. Silk rustles softly as someone passes beyond the garden gate. Peace, though structured, feels almost natural in this moment. Beneath the blossoms, beneath the hierarchy, beneath the centuries of ritual and rice and road, there is simple human endurance. Breath in, breath out, stillness held carefully in place. And then quietly the petals fall.